All right, let's talk Virginia's Tradesman Regulations. So, anytime you take an exam to get any type of license concerning tradesmen in Virginia, so HVAC, gas, plumbing, electrical, anything of that nature, you're going to answer about 10 questions involving Virginia's Tradesman Regulations. And this is very important to understand because this is actually law. Okay? So, if you have a code violation or something, you're not necessarily breaking the law, right? It's not illegal to put in a system wrong or something like that. There are ramifications for it because the code is referenced in the law, but this is the actual law that you need to follow if you're going to be a tradesman. So you should understand it. You should understand how to follow it well, um, and you need to familiarize yourself with the regulations that involve tradesmen and contractors, because contractors are different than tradesmen. So as a tradesman, you can do up to, I believe, a $2,000 job without a contractor's license. So if you need to install a water heater, it might even be 1,000. Hopefully it'll be in here. If not, it's definitely in the contractor's regulations. But you can do basically small jobs, pull permits on them just with a master license, not with a journeyman's, but just with a master's license. But anything more than that dollar value, you have in Virginia, you have to have a contractor's license as well. So I encourage you to read the contractor's regulations also, but the questions on your exam are going to be off the tradesman regulations in particular. So we're going to go through this, highlight the most pertinent points, and and hopefully by the time we're done, you'll have a good grasp on what the tradesman regulations are. This video should not be a substitute for reading these yourselves, but it will give you a good idea of the type of questions that'll be on the exam concerning tradesman regulations. Now, as we go through these individual license and certification regulations, notice that statutes, this is Title 54.1, Chapter 11. So these are, like I said, this is actually Virginia law. This is in the law books, but this is a little PDF that they put together to make the law a little bit more clear, so you're not reading through a law book style, just statute by statute by statute. It starts with significant changes. We won't go through significant changes. Um, the purpose of this is to basically understand the codes of standards of practice and conduct for tradesmen. Um, and then you have your table of contents. You know, as you take a test, um, don't don't downplay the value of being able to go to the code of contents and see where things are, because on your exam there's going to be questions on renewal and reinstatement, standard of practice, and standard of conduct. Those are going to be your most important pages, basically 18 through 27, and then there'll be a few general questions, mostly on definitions or something. Um, the definitions. We won't go through all the definitions. Definitions are things I hate going over in any type of capacity. Definitions are extremely important. When you're talking definitions, whether it be in your code book or whether it be in the tradesman regulations, definitions are extremely important because they define the words you're talking about. So just because, you know, you say apprentice, you know, you might say that guy's an apprentice. The guy over there just started, he's apprentice, right? But apprentice means a person who assists tradesmen while gaining knowledge of the trade through on-the-job training and related instruction in accordance with Virginia's Voluntary Apprenticeship Act. So you have to read that Virginia Voluntary Apprenticeship Act, Title 40.1-117 of the Code of Virginia, to completely understand what an apprentice means. So if basically, as far as Virginia is concerned, if a guy is not taking related instruction, if a guy is not taking actual classes on the trade, then he is not an apprentice, right? So just things like that. Understanding what these words mean when they're used in this booklet or when they're used in the code book, because just because you might use the word in one way does not mean that that's legally what the word is in relation to the law and what you're looking at. So what I generally expect is everybody to go through definitions on their own, and I do expect you to actually read through the majority of these definitions and make sure you understand what they are. There will be questions on your exam from the definitions, but no one definition is necessarily more important than the other. If I had to make sure I understood a few here, I would make sure you understand electrical work, HVAC, helper, laborer, probably helper or laborer would be a good one. Again, apprentice would be a good one. When it relates to somebody's title, okay, HVAC tradesman, journeyman, all right, is an important one. Master would be an important one. Obviously, plumber or plumbing work. Regulant is a very important one. Reinstatement, renewal, supervisor, and trade. So all those things are going to be used, all those words are going to be used a lot in this booklet. So it's extremely important to understand those, but all of them are important. So always make sure you read through the definitions, understand what words have special definitions per the law, and then be able to refer to any definition. If you see a particular word, make sure you go back and make sure you understand the definition at all times. So that is your own busy work. You should read all those definitions at least once. And I'm serious. When in this book, read all their definitions at least once. In your code book, read all the definitions at least once. Anytime you're doing something, anytime you're working with anything, don't skip the definitions. Always read all the definitions when it comes to things like these at least once. Alright, so requirements for licensure. Part 2 is entry. This is how you become a tradesman. Okay, so requirements for licensure or certification. Every applicant has to meet the following requirements. An applicant will be required to take an examination, and it basically lists everything that you're going to have to put on your application. General qualifications for licensure. Alright, you have to be at least 18 years old. Okay. You got to get through 4 years of school too, right? If you're doing it, the journeyman's the quickest way to get a journeyman's. There'll be at least 4 years of school, so odds are you're going to be at least 22ish. But theoretically, if you started apprenticeship at the age of 14, you could get your license at 18. All right, if you could figure out how to pull that off. So yeah. Alright, what's some other important ones here? You got to sit for an examination. You have to have the experience requirements. You have to follow all the rules established by the board. The applicant shall disclose his physical address. A post office box alone is not acceptable. Alright. In accordance with the Code of Virginia, an applicant shall disclose. Each applicant shall disclose conviction in any jurisdiction of any misdemeanor or felony, Any plead of nolo contendere, which is basically a plead of no contest, and that's what I'll say from here on out when it says nolo contendere, because I don't like saying the word. All right, I don't like saying the Latin. Any plea of no contest shall be considered conviction for the purpose of this subdivision. So if you had a misdemeanor or felony where you did not plead guilty but you pleaded no contest, that is considered a conviction for the purposes of this. The record of conviction received from a court shall be accepted as evidence of a conviction. The board, at its discretion, may deny licensure or certification to any applicant in accordance with the Code of Virginia. So if you have any misdemeanor or felony, they can deny your application for licensure. Generally, they're not going to. And my understanding is, most of these, most basic misdemeanors and felonies, they won't necessarily deny you. But if it does involve bodily harm or something like that, there's a possibility. But you need to disclose that to them. And then if they think there's an issue, basically, usually what they'll do is they'll have you appear before the board and you can plead your case. So make sure you disclose anything. Don't worry about it too much. And even if they deny it, you can try and plead your case with them, and get the approval from the board. The board of contractors is basically made up of actual contractors from Virginia, one of so many different types of contractors. And you can find out the makeup of the board. There's a specific group of people that have to be in the board. I think it's one tradesman, one actual class A contractor, one this, one that. But anyway, the people that make up the board are in the trade. So a lot of times you'll get some understanding out of them if you need to go up there and plead your case. So just don't lie on the application to try and get your license, because that's way worse. It's worse to lie on the application than it is to just try and plead your case. All right. And then the applicant shall report any suspensions, revocations, or surrendering or certificate of license in any in connection with disciplinary action, or has been the subject of discipline in any jurisdiction prior to applying for a license or certification in Virginia. So if you had your Maryland plumbing license, say, or your Maryland HVAC license, and you violated building code so many times that they took your license away, then you have to disclose that to the state of Virginia. And the board, at its discretion, can deny licensure for that. This one is obviously more likely to get you in trouble, because if you've had some disciplinary action in another state, then Virginia is going to wonder, are you going to have any issues here? But most of you guys aren't going to have to worry about that, because most of you, I assume, are getting your license for the first time. So, evidence of ability or proficiency. This is basically the form you have to fill out concerning your education and your on-the-work training. So here's where it goes through. This is all in your actual license application, but 4 years of experience and 240 hours of formal training, or 4 years of this is for gas fitter. Gas fitters, 4 years of experience and 80 hours of training. So plumbing 3 is gas. So if you're trying to get your journeyman's gas, then what you can do, if you work for an HVAC company, but your boss has a gas license, I believe you can get away with taking third-year plumbing, because that is the vocational training for gas fitting, and 4 years of experience would be, you already have 4 years of experience working for a contractor that has a gas license. But in general, gas is considered a portion of plumbing in Virginia, not a portion of HVAC. So this, I've heard this kind of works either way, that sometimes they'll say yeah and sometimes they'll say no. So that's something you want to check with Virginia if that's something you're interested in getting. But yeah, you got about 80 hours of training to get your gas. This is for an associate's degree. We're not going to go over this for a bachelor's degree. We're not going to go over this is irrelevant because it's for people from before 1995 and you had 10 years. Doesn't matter. A master. For a master license, 1 year as a licensed journeyman, or oh no, this is on or after. Okay, sorry. On or after 1995, this is relevant. If you have 10 years of experience in the trade, you can get your journeyman's. But really, if you've got 10 years of experience in the trade, you should be going straight for your master's. You shouldn't bother with the journeyman's. It's a wasted step, it's a waste of money. So if you have 10 years of experience, you can get your master's. Otherwise, 4 years of experience and 240 hours training. And they actually, there should be, obviously on your tradesman exam, it gives you, if tradesman exam, on your certification paperwork, your application to get your tradesman, you can do 3 years of experience, 2 years of, or no, sorry, 3 years of training, 2 years of training, or 1 year of training, and then with that, you'd have 5 years experience, 6 years experience, 7 years experience. But this section is really better understood on your actual application. But these are the sections you'll want to highlight. We're not going to go through this anymore because it's not that important. Follow the instructions on your application as far as what the training needs to be for a licensure. All the other things are more important. So with that, the fee for licensure right now is $130. They update this as it goes up. So right now, this is the fee for original tradesman license by examination. This is the fee for your application. There's a separate fee for your examination. So fees for examinations are $100 right now. So $100 for a journeyman's exam. So that's $230 total to get your license, basically. That is all your fees. $130 for the application, $100 for the exam to PSI. And that's all the most important parts of entry. Like I said, really it's 3, 4, 5 that are really important on this. But that's all the important things out of entry. All right, renewal and reinstatement are very important. You need to make sure you understand how to renew and reinstate your license once you get it. So, renewal. All right, so renewal means you don't let your license lapse. Go back and read the definition of renewal. But license and certification cards issued under this chapter shall expire 2 years from the last day of the month in which they were issued. Okay, so if you got your license on March 15th in 2021, then your license will expire on the last day of March in 2023. Okay, so it's always the last day of the month. So in this case, 31st, right? The last day of March. If you got your license in June of 2021, then your license would expire June 30th of 2023. All right, 2 years of the last day of the month in which it was issued. All right. Effective with all licenses issued or renewed after December 31st, 2007 as a condition of renewal or reinstatement. And pursuant to the Code of Virginia, all individuals holding tradesman licenses with trade designations of plumbing, electrical, heating, ventilation, and cooling shall be required to satisfactorily complete 3 hours of continuing education for each designation. All right. So you have to get 3 years of continuing education, or 3 hours of continuing education every 2 years to renew your license. This has to be completed before your renewal can be done. All right, you can send in the application before you take the class if you want, but they will verify. They verify through the providers of continuing education that you completed the continuing education. So if you don't complete it, your license won't be renewed. And then there is a separate individuals holding licenses as gas fitters, whether LP or natural gas. You have to have 1 hour of continuing education. All right. So 3 hours for plumbing, electrical, heating, and cooling, and 1 hour for gas. Renewal fees are, right now, they're $90. All right, and then this is, they always give you the old rates right here. So before August 31st of this year, the fee is $115. After August 31st, before 2021 is $75. Oh, so these are going to be the new fees. Like if you were to renew it today, it would be 75, whatever. Doesn't matter. It'll be on renewal form. These aren't things that you got to remember. They're just for your information. They do get put into law. All right. The board will mail a renewal notice to you outlining the procedures for renewal. However, failure to receive this notice does not relieve you of your obligation to renew. So just because you didn't get the notice, you're supposed to know when your license expires, and you're supposed to know that you need to renew it. So you will get a little thing telling you need to renew. I can tell you, I never get this letter. I don't know why. I swear I never see it. I think I've seen it once. Out of all the times I've had to renew, I think I've actually seen that letter once. 9 times out of 10, I just look at when my license expires. Oh crap, it's expiring soon, and then I'll get everything done with it. And I'm kind of a procrastinator with that, so I generally do it like the last day of the month and wish it needs to be done. Okay, but anyway, they will send you a letter, but don't rely on that letter. Make sure you know when your license expires and you need to renew it. If you fail to receive the notice, a photocopy of the tradesman license or backflow prevention device worker card may be submitted with the required fees as an application within 30 days of the expiration date. So even though this is important, within 30 days of the expiration date, they basically give you a grace period of 30 days to renew. So going back to our first example, if you got your license in March 15th of 2021, and make sure you can understand these word problems because these are the type of questions they'll ask you on your exam. You got your license on March 15th of 2021, right? You have your license expires March 31st, 2023. The last day you can renew, the last day, the date it has to be received by the department it really should be March 31st, but they'll actually give you until April 30th. Okay, so they'll give you basically 30 days from when it expired to get it renewed, or you will have to reinstate it. You let it go if your license expired for more than 30 days, you have to reinstate it. But you've got 30 days from when it expires to actually renew it. But you want to get that done the month it expires, because if you actually let it expire, you don't have a tradesman license while it's expired. So you're legally culpable for anything that happens while it's expired, and they will basically consider it that it never expired at that point. But if there's something bad happens in that period of time in which you needed a license and you didn't have it, you could still get in trouble for not having had your license. So anyway, that's what they give you. They basically give you a 30-day grace period from the expiration. The date on which the renewal fee is received by the department or its agent will determine whether the regulant is eligible for renewal or required to apply for reinstatement. So, you've got 30 days, right? You get your license March of 2021. It expires March 31st, 2023. You mailed the required fees You were late. You mailed the required fees April 14th, 2023, right? For some reason, they don't get the required fees until the 5th of May. So, for what something happened and the mail took 3 weeks to get there, basically you're screwed. They can make you apply for reinstatement at that point because you're past the grace period and they did not receive the fees in time. So the date at which is received by the department is when it's considered good. Now, most of this is online now. You can renew online. There's really no excuse to mail fees. I would not mail the fees. That's just playing Russian roulette when it comes to the Postal Service, right? But if you do mail them in, then they have to receive them. When they receive the fees is when they decide whether or not you did it in time. The board may deny renewal of a tradesman license for any reason that it may refuse the initial issuance of a license. So anything that happened, everything that was in entry, if they could deny you a license, they can deny renewing the license for the same reason. Failure to timely pay any monetary penalty, reimbursement of costs, or other fee assessed by a consent order or final order shall result in delaying or withholding services provided by the department, such as but not limited to renewal, reinstatement, processing of a new application, or exam administration. So if you owe somebody money, like you got a final court order to pay a certain amount of money to somebody, Virginia actually will, if you try and renew your license, say, oh, nope, you can't renew your license because we've got to send this money to go pay for the final order that you got in that court case or something. I don't know anybody who's had this happen, but they can. I don't know how often they do, but they can. They can tell you they're not renewing your license. You have another obligation, and they will send that money to pay that obligation. Reinstatement. If they do not receive the application or fees within 30 days of the expiration date, all right. If they don't receive it in time, like I said, if they didn't get renewal fees until May, then you will be required to apply for reinstatement. Well, what is reinstatement? Reinstatement is more expensive. It's more expensive to reinstate than to renew. Okay, so basically it's an extra fee, and at that point, your license did expire for that period of time. So they don't say, okay, it renewed and it never lapsed. You did not have a license for that period of time. So anything that could legally occur because you did something without a license can still legally be considered to have occurred. All right. So that's probably the most important thing, is that the license actually lapses. The date on which the reinstatement fee is received by the department will determine whether or not it does get reinstated or a new application is required. If you don't reinstate it, you have to do a whole new application, and that is down here. No reinstatement will be permitted once 2 years from the expiration date has passed. So again, if you got your license March of 2021 on, you were supposed to renew it in March of 2023. You did not renew it in March of 2023. After March of 2025, you cannot reinstate it. So you basically got 4 years from when you get your license to have given fees to keep it valid, or to make it valid again in the case of reinstatement. And after that date, you must apply for a new license, and you must meet the then current entry requirements. So, if there's a new entry requirement that you don't meet for some reason, unlikely but possible, if they create new entry requirements, then you'll have to meet the new entry requirements. It's for most people, by the time something like this can happen, you've almost got 10 years of experience, so you can basically just reapply for your license with 10 years of experience. But the crappiest part is you have to take the test again. All right, so I always say, if you're gonna get your license, get it, but don't just keep it valid. Just understand every couple years you're gonna have to pay 150 bucks, really $200 after you take continuing education classes and stuff. Just say you're going to have to spend $200 every couple years to renew the license, and just keep it valid, because nothing sucks more than going through all the hoops, getting your license, forgetting all about it for 5 years, and then wanting your license again and having to reapply, resend everything in, send in new, you have to make up new verification of work forms, you know what I mean? Get people to sign it saying you've got 10 years experience and all that stuff. That and taking the exam again is the biggest hassle. So if you do get your license, keep it valid. The board can deny reinstatement for any reason. They could have refused initial issuance. And same thing, failure to pay any monetary penalty could result in you not getting your license reinstated. When a regulant is reinstated, the individual should continue to have the same number and shall be assigned an expiration date 2 years from the previous expiration date. So, going back to our example again, you get your license March 2021. It expires March 2023. You do not renew your license. You reinstate your license in September of 2023. When does the license expire? The next time. Well, it still expires in March of 2025, because 2 years from it again, right? So, originally your license was supposed to expire in March of 2023, then you renew it, it expires in March of 2025, you renew it, it expires in March in 2027, you renew it, so on and so forth. That expiration date never changes, ever. The other interesting thing about this is when you've got the same number, so, I've got multiple tradesman licenses. So I have plumbing, right? I got plumbing and gas first, and then a few years later I got HVAC, right? Actually, I don't even think it was a few years, but anyway, later on I got HVAC, right? I got my HVAC basically a year before my license was supposed to expire. So let's make up an example, right? Say you got your plumbing license in March of 2021, right? And then you got your HVAC license in April of 2022, yeah. When does your HVAC and your plumbing license expire? The same time, in March of 2023. So the expiration date never changes. The expiration date is always 2 years from when it was supposed to be renewed. So that never changes. It doesn't matter when you paid the fees, when you renewed it, when you reinstated it. Your expiration date is always going to be the same, which is kind of a good thing, because you should always know when it expires, no matter when you renewed it or when you reinstated it. Once you get the license the first time, every 2 years it expires from that date, the end of the month. A regulant who reinstates his license or certification card shall be regarded as having been continuously licensed without interruption. The regulant shall remain under the disciplinary authority of this board during this entire period, and may be held accountable for his activities during this period. So, like I said, you're still legally liable. Say you did a job without pulling a permit, and your license was expired. You didn't have a license. You weren't supposed to be doing the job. You can still get in trouble for that. Don't let this make you think you can't get in trouble for that. But what it does mean is that you have to have followed the codes of conduct during that entire time, so they can deny your license at that point, because you're subject to disciplinary action. So that's really what all that means. All right, standards of practice. So these are all the extra hoops you have to follow since you're a tradesman. Since you are a tradesman, you have special responsibilities. Okay, you are different from a normal citizen. It's sort of like being a police officer or fireman or anything like that. There's extra things you have to do because of what your title is. This is a officially recognized thing, right? So there are special things that apply to you because you're a tradesman, just like there are special things that apply to you if you're a lawyer or a doctor or any other regulated industry. So that's what this is, standards of practice, and then you get to standards of conduct. But these are the things you have to follow as a tradesman, and the standards of conduct are the extra laws that apply to you, kinda. All right. So you can add designations by demonstrating on a form to the board acceptable evidence of experience. So again, if you got your HVAC license and you want to get your gas later, you can add a gas to the license. It all goes on the same license. Really, the only thing that we do a lot that's a completely separate license is backflow. So I have tradesman license and a backflow license. All the tradesman designations are one, the backflow is another. But no matter what trades you have, they're all on a single license. Um, the renewal date, we already talked about this, will be based upon the date the card was originally issued. If you want to delete a designation, you can. You just have to provide a statement saying you want that designation deleted. I have no idea why anybody would want to do this. But I guess if you want to, you can. You can delete a designation. That would be a really odd thing to do, but they make it possible. And you can delete your whole license if you want. And you can tell them you don't want the license anymore. Really, at that point, you just don't renew it. But if you want to immediately delete it, you can. Change of address. Any change of address shall be reported in writing to the board within 30 days. Your license has a change of address form on the back. You fill that out, fax it to them. They'll send you a new license, or you can do it online. But you have 30 days to notify them of a change of address. Post office address alone is not acceptable again. You have to give them your actual home address. You cannot transfer your license. And that's it, basically. As far as standards of practice, that's all your standards of practice. Not a lot. Basically, you have to tell them when you want a license. You can add stuff. You have to tell them when you change your address, and you can add and delete changes. All right, Chapter 5, or Part 5, Standards of Conduct. Revocation of licensure. Basically all of this says these are the ways they can revoke your license if they want. These are the prohibited acts, okay? Failure in any material way to comply with these regulations, okay, can result in revocation of the license. All right. Furnishing substantially inaccurate or complete information to the board and obtaining, renewing, reinstating, or maintaining a license. So if you lie on any forms to the board, you can lose your license. Where the regulant has failed to report to the board in writing the suspension or revocation of a tradesman, LP gas fitter, natural gas fitter, certificate of card, backflow prevention device worker, etc., by another state, or a conviction in a court of competent jurisdiction of a building code violation. So, anytime you have a suspension or revocation of a license in another state, or if you go to court for a code violation and you're convicted in that court for a code violation, so you actually, not if you fail an inspection, but if you do something so egregious that they take you to court over it, then you have to notify Virginia in writing, even if that problem wasn't in the state of Virginia. All right? you have to report that to Virginia, and that's every state. So pretty much if you get licensed in Maryland, you were originally licensed in Virginia, you get licensed in Maryland, something happens in Maryland, then you have to let Virginia know in writing of what happened in Maryland. Okay? If you get licensed in Virginia, D.C., and Maryland, and you lose your license in Maryland, you have to let D.C. know and Virginia know. You have to tell them in writing. You have to send them a letter saying, look, this happened. Negligence or incompetence in the practice of a tradesman. Man, I wish they would enforce this, right? There's plenty of people who should lose their license because they're incompetent in the trade. But seriously, negligence or incompetence in the practice of being a tradesman. Um, you'd have to do some egregious stuff. I mean, I guess if you failed inspection after inspection after inspection after inspection, maybe an inspector will write to the board and just say, this guy should not have a license. But if they just believe that you're negligent or incompetent in the practice of the trade, then you can lose your license. Misconduct in the practice of being a tradesman. So if you say you're working on a system, right? And you don't really like this customer. You don't like the customer at all. Okay, they're pissing you off. So you decide, man, I'm going to make sure they need a new system. And you take an ice pick to the coil. No, my God, you got a refrigerant leak, and they saw you do it, and they report you to the board. That would be something like misconduct in the practice of being a tradesman, okay? So if you do something related to your job and do something that would be construed as misconduct, that would be something like that. Or it could also be in finding of proper or dishonest conduct in the practice of the trade. So again, doing something in the trade, that would be any type of dishonesty, improper misconduct, any of that stuff. So you can't lose your license for being rowdy in a bar. That's kind of misconduct, right? But you can lose your license for being rowdy in the bar and messing up the HVAC equipment. So it's for licensed tradesmen. It's jobs for under $1,000. You can do work. Otherwise, you have to have a contractors. But if you're for licensed tradesmen performing jobs under $1,000, all right. Abandonment, intentional and unjustified failure to complete work contracted for, or the retention or misapplication of funds paid for which work is either not performed or performed only in part. Unjustified cessation of the work under the contract for a period of 30 days or more shall be considered evidence of abandonment. So anything over $1,000, basically this sentence still applies, but it's under contractors regulations. Since as a tradesman you can only do work under $1,000, that's why they put the $1,000 there. If it's over $1,000, it's going to be for Class C, Class B, or Class A contractors. But anytime you abandon a job, so customer says, I want you to put in this humidifier, and they you get a permit for it or something, and you're gonna get you're supposed to put in this humidifier for them. So you got a contract. They give you $400. You're supposed to put in a humidifier. You take that $400. You spend it on whiskey. You don't come back to the job for 30 days. That's unjustified cessation of work. They report you. You can lose your license. Anytime a customer expects you to do something, but you don't show up, if you do that for more than 30 days, that is evidence of abandonment. So you have to complete any contracts you've done, or you have to negotiate with the customer to get rid of that contract. All right. Making any misrepresentation or making a false promise of a character likely to influence or persuade or induce. So if you're bribing people or something like that, then or you misrepresent something. If you tell them, I don't know, what would be a good representation of this? Um, I don't know, lying about why the system isn't working or trying to sell more stuff could technically fall under that, I think. But making or misrepresenting or making any false statements, all right, can be, uh, you can lose your license for it. Aiding or abetting an unlicensed contractor. All right, so you pull a permit for someone else. They're not licensed or certified. Allowing one's license or certification to be used by an unlicensed or uncertified individual, you can lose your license. This is bribing. 10 is all bribing. If you, we're not going to read it out. Basically, you can't bribe anybody, especially if they're in the government or something. So you can't bribe the inspector. You can lose your license. I've actually had guys seen guys almost get in trouble for bribing an inspector. Don't try and bribe an inspector. People did it back in the day. I ain't never seen anybody get away with bribing an inspector. All right. If you are convicted or found guilty in any jurisdiction of any felony or misdemeanor involving, all right? So if you're convicted of any felony or misdemeanor, it's not necessarily bad, right? But if you're convicted of a felony or misdemeanor involving lying, cheating or stealing, a sexual offense, drug distribution, physical injury, or relating to the practice of the profession, there be no appeal pending or the time of appeal has elapsed. Any plea of no contest shall be considered conviction. The record of the conviction certified and authentication such as a form to be admissible in the court. All right. You can lose your license for that. So, if you have a misdemeanor or felony that involves lying, cheating or stealing, a sexual offense, drug distribution, or physical injury are related to the trade. Having failed to inform the board in writing within 30 days that you were pleaded guilty or was found guilty or pleaded no contest to any felony or misdemeanor involving lying, cheating, stealing, sexual offense, drug distribution, or physical injury are related to the practice of the trade. All right, so if you are found guilty of any of those things, you have to report it to the board and then they can get rid of your license. If you don't report it to the board, they can take away your license. You got to report to them. This goes back to the other one. You have to report to them if you have any disciplinary action by any county, city, town, or state or federal government body relating to the practice of the trade. Failure to comply with the Uniform Statewide Building Code. So, Virginia is under a Uniform Statewide Building Code. I don't know if I've mentioned this yet, but Virginia, the building code is statewide, and there's a Uniform Statewide Building Code. Most of the code just references the international codes, but you will want to get a copy of the Uniform Statewide Building Code. They can be found online, and I will have a separate video on getting the Virginia Uniform Statewide Building Code. Practicing in any specialty for which you're not licensed or certified. So you're an HVAC contractor, but you start doing electrical work. You can't do that. Not without an electrical license. This doesn't really apply to most tradesmen. This is for water well contractors and stuff. They have to, if wells and septic systems have to go through the Virginia Department of Health. So that's a separate thing, but you have to deal with the Department of Health if you're doing that. If you don't do that, then that's that, but that doesn't apply to HVAC techs. Failure to obtain a permit or applicable inspection where required, you can lose your license for that. And then the last couple are analysts. and that's the end of standards of conduct. And then the last thing is on continuing education providers. You can ignore that. All right, and then including this booklet are relative excerpts from the Code of Virginia. This is all regulation of contractors. So this gets into the contractors booklet. It's not the whole one, but it's relevant sections. All right. You'll want to read through this. There will probably only be 1 or 2 questions possibly on your exam that has to do with this. So I don't want to go over contractors regulations right now. But everything else here is all about the different contractors licenses. You will want to read through this and understand it. Basically though, if you're going to do any work that's over $1,000, you have to have a contractor license. There are rules you have to follow to get that contractor license. You have to understand those rules just like you have to for tradesmen. And the most important thing is just understanding what license you need and when. So, a Class A license can do basically anything. A Class B license can do up to a certain amount. I think it's, what is it? Class C can do up to $10,000. Class B can do $10,000 to $120,000. And Class A can do anything over $120,000 or something like that. But you can verify everything I just told you by reading these regulations. There may be 1 or 2 questions on your test out of this, so you can read through it yourself, but it's not as important as all the other things I went over. All right. And that is Virginia Tradesman Regulations.